What's a young girl like you doing with Grandpa? The words hit me like ice water as I looked up from my menu at O'Sullivan's restaurant in Denver, Colorado. 3 college students stood behind my husband Robert, blocking our booth with cocky grins plastered across their faces. My name is Janet Mitchell, and at 47, I've learned that appearances can be deceiving. Most people see a petite woman with soft features and assume I'm harmless. They're not entirely wrong. I prefer peace to conflict. But 15 years in Special Forces taught me that sometimes peace requires strength. Robert, only 2 years older than me at 49, looked up calmly from his salmon. His gray hair caught the restaurant's warm lighting, and I could see the slight tension in his shoulders that meant he was assessing the situation. Like me, he'd served in Special Forces, though he'd transitioned to private security consulting 5 years ago. "Does he even still work?" laughed the tallest one, a kid with bleached hair and a leather jacket that screamed fraternity. His name tag read Brad, probably from some campus job. I mean, seriously, what's the deal here? The second boy, shorter but stockier with multiple piercings, snickered. Maybe she's his nurse or something. Helping Grandpa cut his food? His friends called him Tyler, and his breath reeked of cheap beer. The third student, Jake, had intelligent eyes that should have known better, but peer pressure makes fools of smart people. "Come on, sweetheart, you could do so much better. Why don't you ditch the old man and come party with us?" I felt that familiar calm settle over me, the same stillness that used to descend before missions in Afghanistan. My training kicked in automatically. Assess the threats, identify exits, protect the asset. In this case, the asset was our peaceful dinner and Robert's dignity. "Have a good evening, gentlemen," I said softly, my voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made Robert glance at me with raised eyebrows. He knew that tone. The restaurant's other patrons had started to notice. An elderly couple 2 tables over whispered among themselves, while a family with young children looked uncomfortable. The manager, a nervous-looking man in his 30s, hovered near the kitchen door, but seemed unsure how to handle drunk college kids harassing customers. Brad leaned closer, his cologne mixing unpleasantly with the smell of alcohol. "Oh, come on, don't be like that. We're just being friendly." His hand reached toward my shoulder, and I saw Robert's jaw tighten. Something dark flickered in my chest. Not anger, but certainty. These boys had no idea what they were walking into, and their arrogance would be their downfall. The harassment at O'Sullivan's restaurant wasn't our first encounter with ageist assumptions, but it was certainly the most aggressive. People often stared when Robert and I went out together, making their own assumptions about our relationship. Some thought I was a gold digger. Others assumed he was having a midlife crisis. None of them guessed we were both retired Special Forces operators who'd met during a joint training exercise 12 years ago. Robert had been my commanding officer initially, though only for 3 months before I was reassigned. We'd reconnected 2 years after my discharge at a veterans gathering, and the attraction was immediate and mutual. He'd supported me through the difficult transition to civilian life, understanding the challenges in ways most people couldn't. "Ma'am, is everything all right here?" The manager finally approached our table, wringing his hands nervously. His name tag read Steve, and he looked barely older than the college kids causing trouble. "We're fine, thank you," I replied, still maintaining that calm tone. "We were just finishing dinner." Brad laughed loudly, causing other diners to turn and stare. "See? She's fine. We're all just having a conversation here." He moved closer to Robert, invading his personal space. "Nothing wrong with that, right, old man?" I watched Robert's reaction carefully. His breathing remained steady, hands relaxed on the table, but his eyes had gone cold. He was running the same tactical assessment I was, calculating angles and distances. Neither of us wanted violence, but we were both prepared for it. Tyler, emboldened by his friend's aggression, decided to join in. "I bet you were real tough back in the day, huh? Probably fought in Vietnam or something ancient like that. Korea, maybe?" Jake added with a sneer. Before they had all the fancy technology? The ignorance would have been amusing if it weren't so insulting. Robert had deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times, earning commendations for his service in counterterrorism operations. But explaining that to these kids would be pointless. Boys, Robert said quietly, you should probably head back to your friends now. Or what, Grandpa? Brad challenged, puffing out his chest. You gonna fight all three of us? The restaurant had gone quiet, except for the soft jazz playing overhead. Even the kitchen staff had emerged to watch the confrontation unfold. I could see smartphones being raised, ready to record whatever happened next. I placed my napkin on the table and stood slowly. At 5 feet 4 inches and 120 pounds, I probably looked like I was surrendering. The boys' grins widened, thinking they'd intimidated me into backing down. We'll be leaving now, I said, reaching for my purse. Robert, are you ready? But as we tried to move toward the exit, the 3 students shifted to block our path. Brad's eyes had taken on the dangerous glitter of someone who'd had too much to drink and too little discipline. This was about to get interesting. The walk through O'Sullivan's dining room felt like moving through a minefield. Every step toward the exit seemed to encourage the 3 college students more. Brad whispered something to Tyler, who snickered and nodded. Jake hung back slightly, but his eyes remained fixed on me with an expression that made my skin crawl. Excuse me, Robert said politely as we reached the narrow space between tables where the boys had positioned themselves. Nah, I don't think so, Brad replied, crossing his arms. Your girlfriend and I weren't finished talking. The word girlfriend dripped with such disdain that several nearby diners gasped audibly. An older woman at the bar shook her head in disgust, while a middle-aged man started to rise from his seat before his wife pulled him back down. She's my wife, Robert said calmly, but I caught the edge in his voice that meant his patience was wearing thin. Tyler made an exaggerated, shocked face. Wife? Dude, that's even worse. What's next? Dentures in a glass by the bedside table? The cruelty of youth combined with alcohol created a toxic mixture. These boys thought they were clever, but they had no idea they were poking a sleeping dragon. I'd faced Taliban fighters with more sense and better manners. We don't want any trouble, I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm. We just want to leave. See, that's the problem, Jake chimed in, apparently finding his courage. We're not ready for you to leave. We're having such a good conversation. Brad stepped closer to Robert, close enough that their chests almost touched. My husband didn't back down, but he also didn't escalate. He was giving them every opportunity to walk away with their dignity intact. You know what I think? Brad said, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. I think this pretty little thing needs to be with someone who can show her a good time, someone who doesn't need pills to get the job done. The insult hung in the air like a slap. Robert's face flushed, not with embarrassment, but with controlled anger. I could see his hands clench slightly before he forced them to relax. That's when I made my decision. These boys wanted a reaction, wanted to humiliate us publicly for their own entertainment. They thought they were safe, because I looked harmless, and Robert looked old. They had no idea that between the two of us, we had over 25 years of specialized military training. All right, I said, my voice taking on a different quality entirely. If you want to do this the hard way, let's do it properly, outside. Brad's eyes widened with surprise and delight. Oh, this is getting good. You hear that, boys? Grandma wants to take this outside. Tyler pumped his fist. This is gonna be epic. Jake looked uncertain for the first time, but peer pressure won over common sense. As we moved toward the exit, I caught Robert's eye and gave him the slightest nod. He understood immediately and returned it with a barely perceptible smile. They had no idea what was coming. The Denver evening air was crisp as we stepped into O'Sullivan's parking lot, the setting sun casting long shadows between the cars. The 3 college students followed us out with the swagger of young men who'd never faced real consequences for their actions. "This is perfect," Brad announced, looking around at the mostly empty lot. "No audience except the security cameras, and honestly, who's gonna believe this anyway?" Tyler was already pulling out his phone. "Dude, we have to record this. 3 college guys versus Grandpa and his sugar baby? This is gonna go viral." I shrugged off my light cardigan and folded it carefully, placing it on the hood of Robert's truck. The simple action revealed my toned arms and shoulders, evidence of years of physical training that I'd never stopped maintaining. The boys were too drunk and arrogant to notice the warning signs. "Last chance to walk away," Robert said quietly, positioning himself where he could watch all 3 students while staying out of my way. "No harm done, no hard feelings." "Oh, come on, old man," Jake called out, emboldened by his friend's laughter. "You really gonna let your wife fight your battles for you? That's embarrassing even by your standards." I took a deep breath, centering myself the way my instructors had taught me 15 years ago. The familiar calm descended, that special state of relaxed awareness where everything slowed down and every detail became crystal clear. "All right," I said, rolling my shoulders to loosen them. "Do you want me? Let's do it. One idiot at a time." The way I said it, with complete confidence and no trace of fear, finally penetrated Brad's alcohol-soaked consciousness. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his features. "Wait, what?" Tyler stopped recording, confused by my sudden transformation from victim to aggressor. "You heard me," I continued, my voice taking on the command tone I'd used to brief missions. "You wanted to prove you're tough, guys. Here's your chance. But we do this properly, one at a time, no weapons, no gang tactics." Jake took a half step backward. "Look, maybe we got a little carried away. We don't actually want to hurt anybody." "Too late for that conversation," I replied, pulling my hair back into a ponytail. "You followed us out here. You've been threatening my husband, and you've made your intentions clear. So let's finish what you started." Brad, realizing his friends were wavering, felt the need to prove his leadership. "Fine, whatever. This is stupid anyway. I'll just put you down quick, and we can all get back to our lives." He was bigger than me, about 6 feet tall and probably 200 pounds of what he thought was intimidating muscle. But size meant nothing if you didn't know how to use it, and his stance told me everything I needed to know about his fighting experience. Absolutely none. "Robert," I called to my husband, "would you mind stepping back a bit? This might get messy." Robert nodded and moved toward the restaurant entrance, but I could see the slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd seen me spar during our military days, knew exactly what these boys were walking into. "You know what?" Tyler said, raising his phone again. "Maybe we should record this after all. When the cops show up, we'll have proof that she attacked us." "Good thinking," I agreed pleasantly. "Make sure you get my good side." The casual way I said it, like I was posing for family photos instead of preparing for a fight, sent a visible chill through all 3 of them. Jake actually took another step backward, his survival instincts finally kicking in despite the alcohol. But Brad was committed now, driven by pride and peer pressure into a situation his brain couldn't process. He started forward with the kind of telegraphed haymaker that wouldn't have landed on a scarecrow. 15 years of Special Forces training were about to meet 3 college boys who thought YouTube videos counted as martial arts education. This was going to be educational for everyone involved. Brad's wild swing came exactly where I expected it, a right hook aimed at my head with all his weight behind it. In the half-second it took him to throw the punch, I had already decided his fate. Step aside, redirect his momentum, and let physics do the rest. I moved left and slightly forward, catching his extended arm and using his own force to spin him around. Brad's eyes went wide with shock as he realized he was suddenly facing the wrong direction, his body twisted and off balance. "What the?" he started to say, just as I gave him a gentle push toward the large dumpster behind O'Sullivan's restaurant. The satisfying crash as Brad disappeared headfirst into the container, full of kitchen scraps and rotting food, echoed across the parking lot. His legs kicked frantically as he tried to extract himself from what smelled like a week's worth of spoiled seafood and vegetable trimmings. Tyler stood frozen, phone still recording, mouth hanging open in disbelief. How did you... Physics, I explained conversationally. Force equals mass times acceleration. Your friend provided both the mass and the acceleration. I just provided the direction. Jake had gone pale, but Tyler was still processing what he'd witnessed. That was lucky, a fluke or whatever. Brad just slipped. Would you like to test that theory? I asked, turning to face him fully. Tyler was shorter than Brad, but stockier, with the kind of build that suggested he thought muscles alone made someone dangerous. He set his phone on the hood of a nearby car and flexed his shoulders, trying to intimidate me. I do CrossFit, he announced, as if that explained something important. That's nice, I replied. I do combat. He charged with more technique than Brad had shown, keeping his guard up and aiming for a tackle rather than a wild punch. But technique learned in a gym was no match for training earned in life-or-death situations. As Tyler reached for me, I sidestepped and grabbed his belt, using his forward momentum to help him continue his journey toward the ground. But instead of just letting him fall, I guided his trajectory toward the decorative fountain that sat in the restaurant's outdoor seating area. The splash was tremendous. Tyler surfaced sputtering and thrashing, his tough guy persona dissolving along with his hair gel. The fountain wasn't deep, but it was cold, and the shock of the water seemed to sober him up immediately. My phone, he wailed, suddenly realizing he'd dropped it during his impromptu swim. My phone's gonna be ruined. From inside the dumpster, Brad was making sounds that suggested he'd discovered something particularly unpleasant among the restaurant's discarded food. His muffled curses mixed with Tyler's splashing to create quite the soundtrack. Jake, now the only one still standing and dry, looked at his friend's predicaments and then at me. Whatever he saw in my expression convinced him that discretion was definitely the better part of valor. I'm so sorry, he said, backing away with his hands raised. We were drunk and stupid, and I'm really, really sorry. Please don't hurt me. Then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He started crying, not just tearing up, but full-blown sobbing as the alcohol, adrenaline, and embarrassment all hit him at once. I want my mom, he whimpered, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. I just want to go home. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 3 minutes. 2 college students were thoroughly defeated. The third was having an emotional breakdown. And I hadn't even broken a sweat. Robert approached, shaking his head with amazement. 15 years in special forces and you're still full of surprises. I told them, I said, straightening my blouse, one idiot at a time. The aftermath was even more entertaining than the fight itself. Brad finally managed to extract himself from the dumpster, covered head to toe in what appeared to be marinara sauce, wilted lettuce, and something that might have once been fish. The smell that came with him was so overwhelming that even Tyler, still sitting waist-deep in fountain water, wrinkled his nose in disgust. This is assault, Brad shouted, trying to wipe rotting vegetables from his face. I'm calling the cops. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling everybody. Excellent idea, I agreed, pulling my own phone from my purse. Let's call them together. I'm sure they'll be very interested in the security footage of 3 men following a woman into a parking lot. Brad's face went even redder than it already was from the tomato sauce. You attacked us. Did I? I looked around innocently. Robert, did you see me attack anyone? My husband, who had moved closer to get a better view of the entertainment, shook his head solemnly. I saw 3 young men lose their balance and fall into various objects. Very clumsy. Tyler had managed to climb out of the fountain, but was now shivering uncontrollably, his clothes dripping and his phone clearly waterlogged. This isn't over, he chattered through blue lips. Oh, I think it is, I replied calmly. Unless you'd like to explain to the police why you harassed a couple having dinner, followed them outside, and then somehow all ended up looking like you lost a fight with gravity. Jake was still on the phone with his mother, sobbing into the device while trying to explain his situation. No, Mom. I don't know how it happened. 1 minute we were talking to this lady, and then Brad was in the garbage, and Tyler was in the fountain, and I think I might need therapy. The restaurant's back door opened, and Steve, the manager, emerged with 2 other staff members. They took in the scene. The garbage-covered Brad, the soaking wet Tyler, the crying Jake, and Robert and me standing there completely unharmed and unruffled. "Is everything all right out here?" Steve asked cautiously. "Everything's fine now," I replied pleasantly. "These gentlemen were just leaving." Brad tried one more time to salvage his dignity. "This crazy woman attacked us. Look at me. Look at what she did." Steve glanced at the security camera mounted above the back door, then at me. "Ma'am, did you put this young man in the dumpster?" "Not at all," I said honestly. "I simply stepped out of the way when he tried to hit me. Momentum did the rest." One of the other employees, a cook still wearing his apron, was trying very hard not to laugh. "That's going to be some interesting footage for the police to review." "The police?" Brad's voice cracked slightly. "Oh yes," Steve nodded. "We always turn over security footage when customers complain about being assaulted on our property. Standard procedure." Tyler and Jake exchanged worried glances. Even through their alcohol and embarrassment, they were beginning to understand that pressing charges would mean having their behavior examined by authorities, parents, and probably their university. "You know what?" Jake said quickly, ending his phone call. "Maybe we should just forget this whole thing happened." "Speak for yourself," Brad snarled, trying to scrape something unidentifiable off his shirt. "I'm not letting this slide." "Brad, shut up," Tyler hissed. "Do you want to explain to Coach why we got arrested for harassment? Do you want this on our permanent records?" The reality of consequences was finally penetrating their alcohol-clouded judgment. These weren't just random strangers they could intimidate without repercussions. This was real life, with real cameras and real police who would ask real questions about why 3 college men had cornered a middle-aged couple. The fight was over, but the humiliation was just beginning. The perfect ending to the evening came when Jake's mother arrived in a Honda Civic that had seen better days. She was a small, tired-looking woman in scrubs, who took one look at her son's tear-streaked face and the general chaos of the parking lot, and immediately understood that her boy had been up to no good. "Jacob Michael Thompson," she said in the voice that mothers everywhere use when their children have disappointed them spectacularly. "What on earth have you done?" Jake tried to explain through his sniffles, but the story made no sense even to him. "We were just talking to this lady, and then everything went crazy, and Brad fell in the garbage, and Tyler fell in the fountain, and she didn't even do anything, but somehow it's all our fault." His mother's gaze swept over the scene. Brad still picking lettuce out of his hair, Tyler shivering in his wet clothes, and me standing there looking like I'd just finished a pleasant evening stroll. "Ma'am," she said, turning to me with obvious embarrassment, "I am so sorry for whatever my son and his friends put you through. This is not how I raised him." "I understand completely," I replied gently. "Boys sometimes make poor choices when they're drinking. I'm sure he's learned from this experience." Jake nodded frantically. "I have, Mom. I really, really have." Brad's ride arrived next. A lifted truck driven by someone who was clearly his father, judging by the identical scowl. The man took one look at his garbage-covered son and shook his head in disgust. "Get in the back," he growled. "You're not sitting on my seats like that." Tyler's pickup came last, driven by what appeared to be his older brother, who couldn't stop laughing at Tyler's soggy appearance. "Dude, you smell like fountain water and shame," the brother chuckled. This is definitely going on social media. As the various vehicles pulled away with their humiliated cargo, Robert and I stood alone in the parking lot, watching the taillights disappear into the Denver night. The security camera above us continued its silent vigil, having recorded everything for posterity. "Well," Robert said, putting his arm around my shoulders, "that was more excitement than I expected from dinner." "I tried to handle it peacefully," I replied, leaning into his warmth. "They chose escalation." Steve approached us one final time, still looking somewhat stunned by what he'd witnessed. "Ma'am, I have to ask, where did you learn to do that?" 15-year Special Forces, I said simply. "Turns out the training sticks with you." His eyes widened with new respect. "I had no idea. Those boys had no idea what they were messing with." "That's the point," Robert added with a smile. "The best warriors are the ones who don't look like warriors." "Your meals are on the house tonight," Steve said immediately. "And if you ever want to come back, we'll make sure you get our best table." As we walked to Robert's truck, I noticed my cardigan still folded neatly on the hood where I'd left it. I put it back on, transforming once again from tactical operator to suburban wife out for dinner. "You know," Robert said as he started the engine, "I was ready to step in if things got too serious." "I know," I replied, reaching over to squeeze his hand. But it felt good to handle it myself. The drive home was peaceful, a comfortable silence between us that spoke of years together and complete trust. The radio played soft country music, and the city lights of Denver twinkled around us like stars. When we arrived at our quiet suburban home, Robert pulled me close as we walked up the front steps. "Have I mentioned lately that I am incredibly proud to be your husband?" he murmured against my ear. "Show me," I whispered back. And he did. We spent a wonderful night together, celebrating not just our love, but the quiet strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of when the situation demands it. The 3 college students found themselves dealing with consequences that extended far beyond their embarrassing defeats in O'Sullivan's parking lot. The security footage, as promised, was reviewed by police when Brad initially tried to file assault charges, but the video clearly showed him throwing the first punch while Janet acted purely in self-defense. When the footage inevitably leaked online, it went viral under hashtags like Instant Karma and Wrong Woman, turning the 3 into internet laughingstock, as thousands of people watched them being systematically outmaneuvered by a middle-aged woman without her ever throwing a punch. Their university's disciplinary committee took a dim view of students harassing civilians and potentially damaging the school's reputation, resulting in academic probation and mandatory sensitivity training. Their families were mortified, their friends mocked them relentlessly, and their dating lives became non-existent as word spread throughout the campus about their spectacular failure to intimidate a woman less than half their combined size. As I looked back on that evening, I realized that sometimes the most important lessons come not from seeking confrontation, but from being prepared when confrontation finds you, and knowing that true strength lies not in dominating others, but in protecting what matters most with precisely the right amount of force.